Labor's called it the productivity roundtable, and then it became an economic roundtable. And this week, the whatever it's called talkfest begins, and the Prime Minister is assuring us Labor stands for lower taxes.
Well, the agenda is whatever people want to raise. Labor stands for lower taxes. We put that to the election, and the Australian people voted for the lower taxes and lower deficits that we were offering compared with the coalition.
Yeah, but let's just remember, James, the last time the Prime Minister assured us that there would be no tax changes.
I believe that when you go to an election and you make commitments, you should stick to them. My word is my bond.
Yeah, that certainly aged very well, didn't it? And not to mention, when you've got the unions given a front row seat at the round table, you know it's going to be a complete waste of time. But Treasurer Jim Chalmers is shrugging off the critics.
There will always be the usual kind of grumps and cynics who say the usual grumpy and cynical things about this. Their argument essentially is to involve people less, which would seem to me to be a strange way to go about things. I think the effort has already been worth it.
So, Danica, there's a couple of points on this. The first one is I always think it's a good thing for governments to look outside of the bureaucracy and try and get some ideas from the private sector, because the private sector in some parts of Australia is humming and tend to run good businesses and, you know, can actually achieve their bottom line and all that. The issue with these things, firstly, there's a perception here that there's a fixed result because some of the ideas were leaked by Treasury this week. But obviously we've heard from the unions who want a 4-day working weekend, which is just madness. Obviously there's this big working from home push across the country right now. But in theory, I support these things, and I think a couple of good ideas can come out of them. But I just wonder if we're actually going to get anywhere with them. We've had these summits over the years. The Rudd government famously did one where there were actors involved and celebrities, and it just didn't go anywhere. So we'll have to wait and see. But my main concern is there are some serious issues in this country. The big one for me is welfare. We have 1 million people on welfare still. That number, job seeker and youth allowance, has not changed under the Albanese government. So there's 1 million people that should be working that are not, and instead we continue to prioritise migrants and allow people not to work when they should be. Yeah,
and I know we're going to chat about migration in a moment. But firstly, look, we pretty much know, in my view, what could come out of this, James, and that is tax reform. Now, you'll know that Anthony Albanese has now been talking for months about tax reform. Tax reform, tax reform. So what exactly does that mean? Well, according to leaked Treasury documents, the ones you alluded to, Labor has been advised that the budget cannot be fixed without raising taxes and cutting spending. Now, we've been warning for a very long time about out-of-control government spending. In fact, it's at its worst levels since World War II. The chief culprit, of course, is the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is now accounting for about $52 billion of costs. But this advice, this leaked advice from Treasury, would have been well known before we went to the polls.
That's
Jim
right.
Chalmers would have been worded up about this, and I have just been feeling like this talkfest, this roundtable, economic productivity, whatever the heck they're calling it now, this is designed really to butter us up so they can go, OK, we're going to have to increase taxes on X, Y and Z. Oh, but the idea came out of the Productivity Summit. So, you know, we're just doing what was suggested in the Productivity Summit.
Well, and keep in mind, Labor seems to be hell-bent on changes to superannuation and these capital superannuation changes. That is coming in some form. And it is a lot broader than just people's super. It's going to affect farmers. It's going to affect industry. It's going to affect small businesses that are trying to get up and running. So that's already there. I mean, the problem for the coalition, and the other thing is the coalition during the last election opposed a tax cut, which I think fundamentally was wrong and should have, you know, then you went to the polls and you had Labor saying on the polling booths, we are the party of lower taxes. We've supported this. The coalition hasn't. The other thing that must be addressed is the national building codes, which are thousands of pages long. And anyone that is in the construction industry, which is, you know, designed and have been placed to actually build us out of this crisis, are saying that they're making tiny amounts of money. But the red tape and the green tape, which is expanding with environmentalists pushing back, is the biggest problem. So there should be a pause on that building code. The coalition wanted a 10-year pause. There's been some advice about maybe a 4-year pause. That's a really important thing to get these housing targets back on track because they're a mile behind. It seems also that the only way we can get there is building up. And we know a lot of people don't support high-rise buildings.
No, and that is a good point. And I just want to pick up on something you mentioned before about the unions. Now, the unions have got a front row seat at this round table.
Of course they do.
Of course they do. They're occupying
free
this
tickets,
entire... The free tickets,
they're
occupying the entire round table. Now, they want a 4-day working week. I mean, good luck if you are an employer out there. You're already dealing with 8 IR laws. You've got the unions with their fingers in every pie. You've got, spending out of control. Wages, everything. And now you've got to deal with this. And there was an article that just dropped in The Australian this evening, the Shop Distributive and Allied Employees Association. They're calling for workers to be guaranteed a productivity dividend through higher pay, more leave and shorter hours while backing the imposition of mandatory productivity debt reporting on large firms. So, again, good luck if you're an employer out there.
Well, I know some retail bosses and they say under this government, for the very first time, they've had union delegates come to their businesses. These are small family businesses, have 1 or 2 retail stores inside Westfields, and all of a sudden have people, union officials saying, hey, you can't do this, you must be doing that. So they're dealing with things that they never expected to deal with before. We've had huge industrial relations reforms. But on the 4-day work week, I mean, it's an interesting argument because I've sort of softened my stance on part-time working from home, maybe 1 day a week. I think if you can prove that you're doing something of value and you're in the office the other 4 days, that's fine. But the problem is, there's now businesses that are saying when they go to employ someone, the first thing they ask is, can I work from home permanently? Not 1 day a week, 2 days a week, particularly in IT, every day of the week working from home. Now, there's truck drivers out there, there's frontline workers, there's people that simply have never been able to do that. This is a laptop class thing. And it's got to the point now where workers, that's the one bargaining chip to say, I want to work from home 4 or 5 days a week. The problem for those businesses as well is that if the employer goes, OK, well, if we don't need you in the office, do we need you in the country? And the next step will be that big companies will start taking more jobs offshore because they don't need someone in their office, so they may as well be employing them from India or from Africa or another part of the world.
And again, look what's happening in Victoria with Jacinta Allen wanting to make it mandatory at least 2 days a week. So again, I feel for you if you are an employer right now in this country, you're up against everything.